Let's try that. I don't know what happened, but hopefully we'll get you guys back on. I don't know. I don't know what the hell's up with that. Sorry guys, I don't know what happened there. Yeah, I just went ahead and reopened it, and it's I guess it's a public link now to avoid having to send out a new email. I called Alex to see what we could do, and he said just go ahead and get right back on live. So here we are. Yeah, I got this machine back for a repair, and literally the only thing wrong with it was that the contact screw wasn't touching the spring. It was just like a little bit too big of a gap to where like the person had to kickstart it to get it going, and it's always interesting to me when it's something so simple like that, and people will literally send a machine overseas just, you know, for the sake of like turning a screw, you know. Anyway, the core question, you know, for me, it's always come down to personal preference. I find it much easier to tune a machine with a smaller core, a 5/16. Like, you know, I tend to just keep going back to the 5/16 core. I've tried T-tops, I've tried 3/8, and as far as like I find a negligible difference in the way that it runs. I will say that in my experience, it takes a little bit less power to magnetize a smaller core, but as you add more power to a larger core, it will become a stronger magnet. So it has greater potential to be magnetized because there's more mass, but it does take more voltage to get there. Yeah, it's way easier to get it to hit flat on a smaller core. I don't know why it froze up. I think because I'm doing this from my phone again, and I think someone tried to call me and it like froze up the app. 8 wrap 5/16. Maybe why some of my machines warm up a bit. I don't know. I mean, I found that an 8 wrap 5/16 is probably less prone to heating up than a 6 wrap with 5/16. Let's see. Now my plan here is to get into my Instagram inbox from my laptop so that way I can answer some of the questions that were sent last night. Hopefully it was from some of you guys. Let's see. Statistically, here we go. I'm here. I'm just trying to get into my IG inbox. Just so that way I can grab some of these other questions. I just never remember my password. So I gotta like do the blue sparks on the contact point. That's very likely a capacitor. So let's see. Let me find a machine that we know runs all right. This one I got to rebuild anyway, so I'm not going to feel bad about snipping this capacitor. So let's see. All right, let's turn it up. All right, so seems to run pretty smooth, right? There's no spark or anything right there. I'm going to go ahead and snip that capacitor, which would be the same thing essentially as having a bad capacitor, because they either work or they don't, right? So now it's snipped, and now you have a blue spark, right? So if we take a new capacitor, right, and just touch it to, there we go, and now it runs right again with no blue spark. We take that capacitor off, and see that? So just touching it on there and taking it off, that's how you know if you have a bad capacitor. So if your machine's running with a blue spark, go ahead and hook it up, and then take the capacitor and just touch it to here and here while you're running it, and that'll tell you if it's the capacitor that's bad. Let's see, any tips to tapping brass, cast iron? Sometimes the tap doesn't want to catch the hole, yet when you use the same tap on steel, it catches just fine. Ben, are you using tapping fluid or oil? Also, make sure that your tap is nice and sharp. And make sure there's no crud all over it. Brass is a little soft and kind of gummy, so it will give you a little bit a different type of resistance, and you definitely want to use fluid when you're tapping brass. Iron, depending on the type of iron, I've found that sometimes it likes oil and sometimes it doesn't. I typically tend to use at least a little bit if I'm tapping at all. Cheap tap. Yeah, buy some good taps, man. It's so worth it. Just spend a few more bucks on some good taps, and a nice tap handle makes all the difference. I've had this one for years and years. I think I've probably had this thing for 20 years, and it just makes all the difference in the world. Like the feedback that you're feeling when you're tapping, like when you can feel the tool stressing a little bit, and if you have like a nice machined tool like this as opposed to something that's cast, it's going to give you a lot more feedback in your hand. And I think for me, I'm less prone to breaking taps when I have a tool like this, rather than this type. Like this type where you put a little bar through here, and this thing. It's got a lot more moving parts. I like this one a lot better, and I tend to have a lot better results with these. Is there any advantage to running machines with no capacitor? I would not say there's any advantage to that. I've been tattooed by a couple of machines with no capacitor. The only difference I could say, and I don't know that it's related to the capacitor, is it healed like fucking hell, but I don't know that it's at all related to whether or not it had a capacitor. Let's see, I'm still trying to get in here so I can. Let's see, Gino, let's get in. want to make a new password. Okay, here we go. Okay, let's see. Did I miss anything? Coils versus rotary. Could you please explain the difference using stubby coils, like on the dog machines, to a more regular, not the wrap, more the size? Personally, I like the way that they tend to cycle faster and they hit really hard on low voltage. I've just always had a preference for them on a lot of types of setups, especially liners. I really like a shorty coil on even a full frame liner like this. You know, I really like my stuff to run on low voltage, and I've been able to achieve that result with the shorty coils. They tend to hit really hard, they cycle really fast. I haven't had any problem with them heating up typically. Let's see. That's what I was looking for. Let's see. How do I do this? Oh, man. Okay. Let's see. Let's see. Keep changing sticking out top of the bar. Okay. Huh. Alright. Anyway, sorry I'm back. I had to read a message about this machine repair. And until some machines have a silver contact point on the front spring, how does that benefit the machine, and how can you do that? Let's see. Okay. All right, so let's see. I just replaced a spring for my friend Lindsay a minute ago, and I want to show you what that thing looked like after years of use. Where'd it go? Well, I don't know where it went. It's gone. Anyway, the whole front of the spring had worn off. Like the contact screw had just basically worn through the entire tip of it. And you can see on this one, it's starting to wear a little bit, right? When you put a silver contact point on a spring like this, it tends to just mitigate that wear pretty much altogether. So let's see, find all right, so here's an old Spalding with one of those contacts on it. This thing is probably from the 60s or 70s. The silver contact point is hardly worn down at all, and the spring shows zero wear whatsoever. So putting one of those on there does eliminate wear on your spring. There's a couple of drawbacks to it though. One is Personally, I like to have a pretty narrow front spring, like the tip of my springs tend to be pretty small, right? So if I had a spring like this, it's too small to put a hole in it and attach a silver contact point, right? If I try to punch a hole in this, it's just going to break the end of it off. So you have to have a larger tip. So if you were going to use a spring about this size, you'd want to kind of go with a more rounded tip like that. First off, you have to punch a hole in it, and you want to use this thing specifically set up to do that. It's a little guy, and let's see if I can manage to get a hole in this thing without breaking it. Sometimes you have to actually punch the hole before you, let's see. There we go. All right, so now that has a hole in the tip. Right? It's a hole in the tip of your spring, and you gotta have the right punch for it. You set up one of your spring punches with the tiny guy like that. And I don't know if I have any of them around here. I did, but when you get the little, they come in a little bag from, get them from Spalding and Rogers. The contact points have like a little nub on there like that, and that nub goes through that hole, right? You pop it through that hole, and then you set it down flat and you hammer it. I don't have one handy. I'm out of them, I believe. But you can see on the bottom of this spring, it's kind of mushroomed out a little bit. That's because you put that little nub through the hole, and then you hammer it on the back side, and it mushrooms that out so it holds it in place. What do I think about single coils? I think single coils have their place. If you like something that's really lightweight and runs really soft, then by all means, I don't know that I've ever had a single coil that's run as hard as I've wanted it to for like fast outlining and stuff like that. But I've definitely built a good handful of single coil machines for people that wanted them to run a certain way for like soft black and gray or for fine line stuff, and they were pretty happy with them. And my brother swears by them. He uses single coil machines all the time. Although they're pretty large coil. I don't know if I have any of those around here. No, I thought I had one around here. I think I just have one of those frames. Talk about needle bar bend and rubber band tension, troubleshooting ink flow. Chris David, real quick to answer your question, yes, I have used aluminum jigs. The only thing that I will say about using the aluminum jigs, and I've used them for years, they do wear out faster, the threading wears out faster, and they tend to corrode from the flux. Let me see if I can find it. So these guys are steel. Let me see if I can find an aluminum one to show you the difference. I'm sure I still have one or two of them around here. Sorry about it. Let's see. Let me try to find. I might have tossed them, but I used them for a long time. They're easy to machine, but they do corrode a lot faster from the flux. But there's no safety issues with using them. Just be careful that you don't melt them with your torch, because aluminum does have a pretty low melting point. But they're fine to use. I used them for a long time. Let's see, needle bar bend and rubber band tension, troubleshooting ink flow. when I set up a machine, before I even put the needle in the tube, whether it's a liner or a shader, I give it a little bit of a bend, just a little bit, right? Because we want your needle to ride in the bottom of the tube, right? So let's see. So you want a little bit of an arc, so that way it's riding right here. And then let's see. And I'm not one to use rubber grommets very much. I'm a paper towel guy. And I like to make sure that this is really snug, right? You don't want that to have any play on there. You also don't want it to be too rigid. You want it to be, kind of have a little bit of give, but you don't want it to be loose at all, right? And I'm a 2 number 12 rubber band guy. Let's see. Let's go find one more. There's 2 of those. I like to use 2 number 12s. And you want to pull a little bit, pull up on your needle bar just a little bit, like that, right? Okay. Okay. Where can you purchase a good coil machine? Any thoughts on silicone grommets? Sean, I don't use the grommets at all, man. I just use paper towel. I know that certain machines, like Dan Cuban's machines, he recommends using the grommets, and I'm not going to argue with that at all. I've never used his machines, but I know he knows what he's doing. But I'm a paper towel guy, and that's if I ever have issues with spitting or flow, I always look to my connection at the armature bar first, and the way that the needle is riding in the tube. As a guy, when aligning your armature bar setup with the frame, should the pin start at the back of the tube hole? Not necessarily. It depends on the armature bar. Like this one is a longer A bar or a longer nipple, so that way we're able to move this back in the frame, right? So the pin starts a lot further back than the back of the hole. Maybe if we're looking at maybe from this point here, if that's what you're talking about, then yes, like this right in the in the back of the hole is kind of a really good starting point. I think that's perfectly fine to align from there, like kind of making that your point 0. Yeah, those VK jigs are really nice. I have one around here somewhere. Oh, I think that's one of them. I think this is one. Maybe this one. I think this is one of them. And they're super nice. I think I've got two of them. I think that's fixed. Fixed. Yeah, I think, or you mean this, let's see, let me go back and make sure I'm answering. This is for Hokum Peddler. Thanks, Seth. Several of my machines seem to be really finicky in terms of setup, which is why I ask. Yeah, that's why I use the paper towel, because it's always the same. I've just been doing it like that for over 20 years, and it's just what works for me. Great, thanks. Also thought the Charlie Wagner Repro you made was so cool. Plans to make any more like that? I don't really have any plans. It's kind of like when I come into the shop to make stuff, I pretty much just kind of make what I feel like making that day. I typically don't make a whole lot of plans to do stuff like that. So it's kind of like luck of the draw, kind of whatever materials I have sitting around that day. You know, I'm sure I'll make another one at some point, but I don't have any plans to, per se. Do you think the rubber from the nipple causes too much reverb on the needle eyelet, making the ink splatter? You know, I don't know what about it causes it, but I just know that when I've eliminated the rubber, I've had a much easier time getting rid of the ink splatter. It's an old Spalding. I'm gonna, whoa, who knows what that is? What is that? Looks like blood. I don't know from where. Man, this dude's spent some time underwater or something. Man, this is just gnarly. How'd you get the amp so low on your Belmont liners? All the other 1-inch coils I have run a lot higher. I think part of it is the amount of mass that's under the coils. Having a whole lot of iron mass under the shorties really helps to lower the amperage. I'd be curious to look at the other machines you have with shorties and see if they've got a nice thick yoke under the coils, or if the frame's nice and thick under there, or if they're brass machines or aluminum or stuff other than iron. Just curious. thing out of here. I'll be right back. Thing's totally frozen in there. Totally rusted on. Dude is frozen. Does not want to come off. Does heat treating the coils before you wind them? If you heat treat them properly, let's see. Sorry, I'll adjust the camera in 1 sec. It's sorry, it's on my phone and I've got like just a little bracket here. If you heat treat them properly, if you anneal them, which means like heating them up to red hot and then cooling them really, really slow, you know, over the course of like a full day. So like if you were to heat them up with a torch to red hot, like, you know, a way to do it at home or in the home workshop would be to heat them up with a torch to red hot and then drop them in some sand overnight. And the next morning they should still be warm. That way, you know, that's one way of knowing you've annealed them properly. If you cool them off too quickly, you're gonna have the opposite effect and they're not gonna run as well. Ideally, you want to get cores that are already annealed, or steel that's already been annealed, which is going to make it easier to machine anyway. I'm going to mill this screw off of here so that way I can get this binding post off, because this thing is like frozen the fuck up. See if I can, maybe I can adjust the camera so you can see this way, just for a second while I do this. Running out of room in here. Literally had to mill the head of the screw off that thing. There we go. This thing was fucking seized. There we go. Now let's see if we can get the coils off. Not having a whole lot of confidence in that happening after all that. hopefully. Oh, one just loosened right up. Oh, sweet, they both did. This is the best way to remove rust from a machine. I would just get a little bit of oil and put it on a rag and wipe it on there. You can get yourself some Renaissance wax is good for stuff like that, or like even just like a little bit of like PB Blaster or like WD-40, something like that. Just some kind of penetrating oil and spray it on a cloth and wipe it on there. You know, make sure you're not spraying your machines with disinfectants. If you're gonna disinfect your machines, spray the stuff on a rag and then wipe the machines down. Don't spray it on the machine because you will corrode connections and cause the machine to fuck up eventually. All right. You know, this guy was just giving me a hard time. You have any trouble with chatter noise only between certain volts on a machine? That's great, just a lot of chatter around 7-8 volts. Yeah, you know, I tend to think, I kind of believe that machines like have a certain sweet spot, you know, where like they'll sound perfect in a certain range, and then once you get past that certain range, they start to sound funky. And then sometimes if you go, you know, past it, you like, you know, it runs awesome like 5 to 6 volts, and you know you're upwards like 7-8 volts, it sounds shitty, and then you get, you know, 8 or 9 volts, it starts to sound fine again. I think that a lot of that has to do with the harmonics and, you know, like basically just the way that all the parts tend to resonate and vibrate, you know, where they're attached to the machine, you know, and I think a lot of that is those little air gaps that we've talked about a lot, where, you know, you have, you know, your armature bar, and you have your A bar, right, and your rear spring, and your washer, and your screw, and your front spring, right, and ideally you want to eliminate those little air gaps that occur in spots like that, right? You know, sometimes if you look close at the washer, you'll see that the edge of the washer isn't actually square. You know, you want to wash, you know, when washers are stamped, they are square on one side and kind of rounded on the other. You know, some of them are machined, but most of them are stamped, right? So if you look closely at your washer and you have it upside down, meaning that like this part is against your spring or whatever, then you'll end up with these little air gaps, right? And you know, you can have those all over your machine in a lot of different spots that create a bunch of those little air gaps. And when your voltage reaches a certain point, it might be kind of causing all those little air gaps to vibrate in a certain way and create a bunch of chatter, right? So, you know, that's a lot of times why people will use an O-ring. You know, this air gap in particular, it's a real quick fix to put an O-ring. You know, you put it like that, and it you know, tightens that up. It gets rid of this. It gets rid of that air gap, and it gets rid of that chatter. So, you know, looking over the whole machine, right? Let's try find a machine. here's a good example of a machine with a bunch of air gaps. And it's a Rogers machine, lo and behold. But you can see in there, there's like a few little spots for light to pass through, where the spring is attached to the armature bar, and the spring meets the other spring. There's like this little gap between the rear spring and the front spring, right? And to eliminate that chatter, what some people do is put an O-ring, or where'd this thing go? I just had it. Losing my mind, losing everything. Oh, here we go, right in front of me. This spring has a little lift on the front of the rear spring. It looks like this, I think this is one of Aaron's rear springs, but it's got a little tab on there that he's incorporated into the design to put a little bit of a lift, and that helps to eliminate that air gap, right? Find it with stamp washers, the sharp side always breaks my springs. Right, so sharp side should go against your file, right? So if you've got, you know, a rounded side, which is going to make an air gap, and the sharp side, which isn't, take the sharp side and deburr it. You want to deburr all your stuff anyway, right? And make sure it's nice and flat. Found real thin O-rings, black rubber at the hardware store in the plumbing section at work, real nice. Some are way too thick, in my opinion, cause severe reduction in power. Yeah, absolutely. They make your front spring too stiff. So as far as O-rings go, yeah, like you definitely want to allow your front spring to flex as intended. So you built a machine a while back. There's a huge cap on it. I think it was a one-off. How did they change how it run compared to regular use cap? It doesn't change how it ran at all. It's a Rogers machine with a huge cap on it. Here's another set of coils with a huge cap on it. As long as the voltage rating is, you know, where it's supposed to be. This one's, you know, 50 volt, 50 UF. It's not going to change how it runs. It's really just more modern capacitors are smaller. Older, you know, your older technology are going to be larger. Let's see. Aaron Kane sent me some giant ones. I'm trying to find the rest of them. I do want to use them, but they don't seem to change the way they run. I mean, it's just it's really you know, maybe they last longer. I don't know, but oh, here's another large one. I'll probably use this guy on one of the next builds, and it has the same rating as this guy, and these are both the same brand. One's just a lot older than the other one, and it has the same rating on it. Smoke DMT every day. DMT every day would be a lot. That would be so much information. Showing the Rogers machine too. I eliminated all the air gaps. Check the washers though. So you remember, it calmed down once I had a needle and a tube on there. Absolutely. It's really, you know, it all comes down to like harmonics in that sense. Like when you're listening to the machine, like, you know, when we talk about tuning a machine, it's more than just the way it runs, or the way that it operates. It's also the way that it tunes. You know, it's like, you know, that sound when you go into a tattoo shop and you can hear whether the people there know what they're doing. You know, like you can hear their machines and know instantly, and it's kind of hard to convey over video, right? But like this thing just has that. You can't hear it through there. It probably sounds like hell, but it's got that sound, right? This one too. All those air gaps are gone. How do you bend the lip in the front of the back spring without causing a new wireless coils at? Wireless coils. These wireless coils? Those wireless coils? Is that what you're talking about? Well, the thing is, you're not like, okay, you're bending up in the back of that rear spring, and you're not creating a new air gap because that section of spring isn't long enough anymore to make a gap, right? Like it's kind of you're moving that piece of metal far enough away from the armature bar to where it's not going to rattle against it. So, you know, technically it's an air gap, but it's giving you enough distance to where it's not going to contact it. Battery operated wireless, why has no one made any yet? Gaston at FK Irons has. So for Martin, the way you bend that is just to grab it with a set of pliers. Let me cut a spring real quick and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Or, let's see, even better, let me find a bin of springs here. I got some springs here somewhere. Right. And if I want to bend the front of this, I'll grab it with a set of pliers and then tweak on it just a little bit and bend it up like that, right? And then I'm going to use that as the lift for my front spring. I don't even bother putting a bend on my front spring at that point. I just put the hole here and then let the front spring use that as a little crutch, and then when I tighten it up, it bends it upward. He said that a few of your machines, when you give an example online of how they run, say 125, is this roughly where they should run loaded? I know there are fixed rules, but wondered. The machines that I sell, the numbers that I'm sharing are unloaded numbers. When I tune a shader, you know, something for myself, you know, typical like color packing, standard approach shader, for the way that I work. Typically, I'm trying to land like right in the 100 to 105 range unloaded. When I load it up, it's going to be closer to 85. So the numbers that I share are definitely unloaded numbers. This guy's running at 107. Loaded probably 90. I got a doctor's appointment here in a little bit, so I got to jump off. If there's any more questions, got to go to the chiropractor. Smoking today. Had a cap start smoking the other day. You know, it just sounds like it's just probably past its prime. They definitely go bad. They're not a lifelong part. They are a wear part. Eventually, they do go bad. So it just sounds like it's time to replace the capacitor. Anybody have any other questions before I take off? Chiropractor's appointment in a little while. Sorry about the technical difficulties earlier. Let's see, what was that one? When you see a tiny bit of blue sparking, is it the sign the cap's going bad, or is a little sparking normal? I think a little sparking is normal, but blue is a sign. I think blue is a sign that your cap's going bad. Typically, the sparking that you see that's normal is going to be more like kind of yellow or white-ish. When it's blue, I think it's a sign the cap's on its way out. I have some machines that have a little gap where the light shines through between the front coil and armature bar, but still seem to run well. How big of a problem is it if they're not completely flat? It's not a problem at all. If they run fine, then there's not a problem at all. I mean, it's just sort of a rule of thumb, you know, but like it's not 100% required that they hit perfectly flat. You know, to give you give you an idea, like this Rogers machine, you know, everybody knows that fucking Paul Rogers was, you know, knew quite well what he was doing. This thing hits crooked as fuck. This thing is like all the way wonky, and the front coil is like super fucking sideways, and it's, you know, hits sorta on one side of it and it runs awesome. It's, you know, ideally you want it to hit flat to kind of eliminate that chatter. And you know, the coil is going to be most efficient when it's hitting flat, but it's not required. And if the machine runs well, then I wouldn't worry about it. You know, worry about it if it's not running well. It's just kind of one of the things you look at. If the machine's you know, spitting ink, if you're spitting pigment while you're working, then, you know, make sure it's hitting flat. That would be one of the things I'd check. If the machine's heating up, see if it's not hitting flat. If your amps are higher than you want it to be, you know, getting upward, you know, past 0.75, you know, see that it's hitting flat. Had a guy message me kind of recently and say that, you know, his amps were kind of high on one of his machines that he had put together, and he wanted to know why. And we kind of went through bit by bit, and one of the things that we did was, you know, help him to get his coil to hit, or his armature bar to hit flat, and it dropped the amperage by like a quarter of an amp, just by making it hit flat. So that is one of the things that will affect the way it runs. But if it's running all right, then I wouldn't worry about it at all. It's not something that like is detrimental if the machine's running. It's, you know, how does it tattoo is the most important part, right? It doesn't matter like what it feels like against your thumb or what it sounds like if it tattoos right. All right, I'm gonna jump off. Shoot me some messages directly to my inbox, and I'll try to answer them in the next couple of days. I think you know, if you can send some photos and videos along with what the machine's doing, if it's not running right for you, I'm happy to try to help out and troubleshoot some stuff via the direct message. So that's a good way to get a hold of me for now. I am going to be taking a break from Instagram pretty soon, not for long, probably just a week or so, but I'll make a post about that with good contact information for me. I'm going to jump off and head to my chiropractor's appointment, and thanks, guys.